The moment the first explosion hit, we thought it was over. The hotel trembled, glass rained down from shattered windows, and the distant screams of the unlucky ones filled the air. We had survived, barely, scrambling through fire and debris, dodging panicked tourists and security shouting orders nobody could follow. We thought we had made it. Then the second bomb went off. I remember the sound more than anything. A deep, gut-wrenching, concussive blast that rattled my bones and sucked the air from my lungs. It wasn't just fire or smoke this time. Something different spread through the air. A thick, acrid mist rolling out from the epicenter, settling over the bodies and streets like a living thing. We ran. We didn't know what else to do. Jonathan and I had come here for work, a simple business trip that had gone straight to hell. Our families were waiting for us back home, unaware of the nightmare unfolding. Every step we took through the chaos was fueled by the desperate need to make it back to them. At first, the change was subtle. The survivors with us, strangers who had the same instinct to flee, started breathing heavily, their eyes darting, muscles tensing like they were ready to fight. Then it got worse. A woman tore at her own skin, screaming about something crawling beneath it. A father clutched his child before turning on him, fists flying, teeth bared. People who should have been running together turned on one another, teeth gnashing, voices shrieking in rage. It was like a virus of fury. Whatever was in that mist didn't kill people. It made them something else. It stripped away reason, left nothing but raw, violent anger. And we were at ground zero. I don't know why it didn't affect me. I don't know why it didn't affect some of the others. But as I watched the streets turn into a war zone, blood staining the pavement, I knew one thing for sure. We had to get out. We had to find others like us. And we had to survive. Navigating the city became a gauntlet of death. We stuck to alleyways, avoiding the open streets where the infected tore into each other like rabid animals. Jonathan took point, his grip tight on a rusted pipe we had scavenged from a wrecked storefront. Every turn was a gamble. Every shadow held the possibility of death. Then it happened. A man, eyes wild with rage, lunged at us from a side street. Jonathan shoved me aside and swung the pipe, cracking the man's skull with a sickening crunch. But he didn't see the second attacker. A woman, her face contorted in fury, buried a jagged piece of glass into his side. Jonathan staggered, blood pouring from the wound. I caught him as he fell, his breathing ragged. "Go," he rasped. "Get to your family." I refused to leave him at first. But the infected were closing in. With no other choice, I ran, leaving my friend behind in a city that had become hell on earth. If there was still a way out. The journey south was relentless. Every town we passed through bore the same signs of devastation. Burned out cars, shattered windows, bodies left where they fell. Some places were completely abandoned, while others were filled with roaming mobs of the infected. I scavenged supplies where I could, sneaking through the ruins of gas stations and convenience stores, avoiding the gaze of anything that moved. Food was scarce, and water was even harder to come by. I drank from rain puddles when I had to, rationing what little I found. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on me, but stopping wasn't an option. Delhi, Louisiana, was still a long way off, but it was home. My family was there, waiting for me. Or so I hoped. I met a few others along the way, survivors like me who hadn't succumbed to the madness. We traveled together for a time, watching each other's backs. But trust was fragile in a world where survival meant everything. Some fell to the infected, others simply vanished in the night, leaving only their footprints behind in the dirt. The closer I got to home, the worse the landscape became. Entire highways were choked with abandoned cars, many of them splattered with blood. Fires burned in the distance, thick black smoke curling into the sky. It was a vision of the end of the world, and I was right in the middle of it. Still, I kept moving. Because if my family was still out there waiting for me in Delhi, then I had no choice but to find them. Along the way, I met Mary. She was a survivor, no different from the rest of us, but her eyes told a different story. They were tired, haunted, yet determined. She had been separated from her family in the chaos of the bombs, and now she clung to the hope of finding them. her father especially. He was a prepper, someone she knew could help her survive this nightmare. She believed in him, in his strength, and in his ability to protect her. Mary had nothing to her name except the clothes on her back, and she was armed with nothing more than a crude knife she'd fashioned from a piece of scrap metal. But I had something, a gun, a revolver I'd scavenged from a wrecked police car. I promised her I'd help her find her family, but in return, she had to trust me. We could cover more ground if we worked together. Mary agreed, and our journey became more than just survival. It became a mission. We moved quickly through the towns, avoiding the infected, following any leads we could find. Along the way, she told me more about her father. He wasn't just a prepper. He was a man who had spent years preparing for something like this. He had food stores, weapons, a safe house. If we could get to him, we'd be safe. We faced countless dangers. People, not much different from us, had become desperate. In one town, a group of them ambushed us, hoping to steal our supplies. I drew my gun, firing a warning shot into the air. They hesitated for a moment, but it was enough. We didn't want to kill anyone, but we weren't about to let them take everything we had. The next few days were filled with tension, but Mary kept going, and I couldn't abandon her now. We reached a small farmstead near the outskirts of a town. She recognized it immediately, but there was no sign of her father. It was a gut punch, the silence pressing in like the weight of the world itself. It wasn't until we checked the barn that we found him. He had been hiding out, trying to stay safe from the chaos, and he had seen the destruction unfold from a distance. I had never seen a man's eyes fill with so much relief. He embraced Mary tightly, his weathered hands gripping her as if he could never let her go again. He thanked me, though words didn't seem enough for what we had done. Mary's father made good on his promise. He gave me the gun I had asked for, a small piece of hope in this broken world. But that wasn't why I had helped her. In a world this messed up, maybe it was the small moments, the connections, that mattered most. We couldn't save the world, but we could save each other. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.